Someone like George Saunders, I think, really cracked open the short story universe for me. Like, oh wow, you can be funny, you can be contemporary, you can be silly, in a way that as a young person, like I just hadn't seen a lot of that in the short stories that were given to me in school. And then, outside of writing, there's an endless list of writers who've been pushing boundaries, doing innovative things for decades and decades.
Hi, Dolan. Welcome to Read and Write.
Hey, Deb. Thanks for having me.
Awesome. So why don't you tell the listeners a little bit about yourself?
Sure. My name's Dolan Morgan.
Mm-hmm.
I'm a writer, an illustrator. I live in Greenpoint, Brooklyn. And that's it for now.
So we are talking today about making fantastical stories out of mundane ideas, or just wrapping a story up in the mundane, which you do really well. I've read some of your short stories. I have to admit, I like the short story ones you do versus like the illustrations, the comics. Just that's what I'm comfortable with. That's what I like. So, but they're really good. And
Thanks,
you
Deb.
do that. Sorry, I didn't give you any room to comment there. And I was curious, what comes first for you when you're writing or when you get these ideas? Do you come up with the fantastical idea first and then wrap it up in something usual, or is it the other way around?
That's a good question. I would say I come at it from different angles,
Okay.
depending on the story.
Depends on the story.
But a pretty common one is just thinking of something that I'm like, that seems like it would be a really difficult thing to make a story about. So
Okay.
I want to do it.
Um, what's your writing day look like? Like, how do you have a structured writing time? I don't know if you're doing this, if you do this full time. Like, I don't know anything about your style. Tell me about it.
Hmm. It's been over the years, it's shifted a lot. It's been erratic
Mm-hmm.
at times. Lately, for the past couple years, I would say, morning has been the main place I get a lot of my
Mm-hmm.
routine writing done. So like
Uh-huh.
get up early, have a nice breakfast, write for a solid chunk of time before I
Mm-hmm.
do anything else in the day. And then, as I get a little further into a story, then I feel compelled to be like, oh, now I got to add this piece, and maybe I'll be doing
Right.
more in the evening. But
Mm-hmm.
having that morning dedicated time gets me through the periods of, I don't know what to do next. I'm uncertain. Like I'd sit down
Mm-hmm.
and put that time in every morning.
Yeah. Do you Now you say that's your routine writing time. Is that the time when you write best, or you write best at night? Like, do you find that you have that cycle that one time works just really well creatively for you versus the other?
I do think the morning is more reliable
Uh-huh.
for me. I don't know if it's necessarily, it'd be interesting to go back and do a little chart of like, these are the things that I think are my best writing and when did they
Right.
occur.
Mhm.
But I do think there's like an unfilteredness that happens in the morning. That like
Mhm.
my day has not been diluted by other responsibilities yet. It's
Mhm.
kind of half out of a dream. I feel my mind feels like really pure in the morning,
Mhm.
and like I'm able to just kind of pump stuff out in a way that it might be more mitigated by other things at other parts of the day.
Mhm. Yeah, 'cause I notice when I do a lot of talking to writers on the podcast, and it always just seems like people are either fall into 2 categories. They are an early morning writer or they're late at night writer. Like, there seems like there's no in between. Like, nobody's like, "Yes, I write best from 2 to 3 in the afternoon." Nobody does that.
Yeah, I used to be a nighttime person, and then at some point it stopped working. And I think
Mhm.
I stagnated for like a couple of years, being like, "No, I'm a night person." But then like it just wasn't producing as much
Right?
until I finally was like, maybe I'm wrong about myself. uh, that's something different.
I feel like I went through a similar journey, the early part of my life, like college, just out of college area, that I was like, "Yes, I do a lot of writing at night," and at some point, you just get old,
Yeah,
and your
probably
brain
fine.
doesn't work that well after, I don't know, X PM, so then I had to switch it up, and then in my life, it's crazy. I've got kids and everything, so, like, I have to get everything done when the house is quiet and no one's there. So that's important. So it turned out to be mornings. Um, so do you have you always written short stories? Like, what compels you to write? Like, is it a compulsion, like, you just need to get these stories out? Or do you have an end goal, like, something you're working towards?
Hmm. Uh, so yeah, short story has pretty much always been the form that I'm most
Mhm,
drawn to. Don't have any. No, I've tried at a novel, and I just go, that's not for me.
mhm,
I feel much more at home with short story, and then I don't know exactly what drives me. It's always been a part of my life since I was young. I
mhm.
do think it's like one of the primary ways I process my experience of the world. Like I have emotional reactions to what's happening in my life and to the
Mhm.
people around me. And there's elements of it that I find difficult to describe just by like talking to someone or thinking to myself that
Right.
can really only be expressed, at least for me, through an elaborate set of constraints and circumstances that like point to what I'm feeling. And so I think
Uh-huh.
that's often what I'm doing. I'm trying to build these like elaborate structures that like give a glimmer into what's going on in my
Mhm.
interior world. And they're all incomplete and, kind of fail to do it. And I have to do it over and over again.
Right.
But I think that's one of the main driving forces, that there's something inside of me that I don't necessarily see reflected in the world out there. And I feel um, hard pressed to communicate in the normal ways. And so this medium helps me do that.
I don't think you're alone there. I think a lot of writers feel like this. Um, so what how you said you've been writing since a kid. What was your early work like? What did you write as a kid?
Oh man, I used to have my grandmother was my typist when I was very little. When I
Awesome,
couldn't
you had a
type.
typist.
She had this great old typewriter, and I spent a lot of time at her house. And
Mhm.
one of our main activities was I would kind of like narrate these short stories because I was trying to write a book. They were all about, at the time, I believe the topic was pizza munching aliens. They were aliens who'd come from outer space to steal our pizza. Um,
Uh-huh.
young boy who had to solve a mystery, fend them off. Um, in going back to look at them years later, I realized that I was, even without knowing it, like processing quite a few of the things that were going on in my life. Like,
Uh-huh.
my parents got divorced when I was very young, and one of the
Mhm.
main features of the pizza munching aliens narrative, I believe, is like a young boy and his estranged father, like going on these adventures to solve things together. And like
Mhm.
at the time, I didn't wasn't really thinking about it, but my mom was like, "No," we're like, "It's not a coincidence that those are the details."
Do you still have these, grandma typewritten stories somewhere?
I don't. They might be at my parents' house somewhere. I know we unearthed them like probably 15 years after they'd been
Mhm.
written, but I haven't seen them in quite a while.
I think that's awesome that you were writing that young. Um, what work is like has inspired you like going forward as an adult? Like what's influenced you in your writing?
Mm. I mean, definitely finding writers who were doing adventurous things that made me go, "Oh, you
Mhm.
could do anything with fiction." When I was very young,
Right.
someone like George Saunders, I think, really cracked open the short story universe
Mhm.
for me. Like, oh wow, you can be funny, you can be contemporary, you can be silly, in a way that, as a young person, like I just hadn't seen a lot of that in the short
Mhm.
stories that were given to me in school. And then, outside of writing, there's an endless list of writers who've been pushing boundaries, doing
Right.
innovative things for decades and decades. All those folks are inspiring me, continue to inspire me, and folks who do it today too. But also, I think I'm just mostly inspired by other forms of writing, like spam emails, like business writing, self help writing.
Mhm.
Like I'm just fascinated by um, the hyper niche language that gets produced in those spaces, and
Right.
love the idea of like repurposing those chunks of language and infusing it with like elements of emotion that they might not normally have been saddled with in their normal days. Like
Mhm.
a book of coupons doesn't normally have an element of somebody processing, I don't know, some depression that they're going through. But
Right.
using that language as a vehicle for that feels exciting and inspiring to me. And so I think I'm inspired often by, I don't know, language for other purposes.
Okay. I think I understand, I think, where you're going with that. Like, sometimes you I don't know. It's kinda like when you look at something so long and it kinda loses its meaning, so you attach new meaning to it. That's
Hmm.
what it reminds me of.
Yeah, definitely.
Um, Now, since you write mainly in short form, do you consider your body of work, like, connected in any way, or are they all just standalones?
Oh, I mean, I not connected in the way that like Stephen King has, the monsters across different,
Right.
books or whatever. I think there are some just innate thematic things that I can't ignore that
Mhm.
persist across things that I'm working on, and that just ideas that preoccupy me. But I'm not like intentionally setting out to create like a linked set of stories. I recently finished and had a new story come out that felt like a sister story to one that came out a couple of years ago. It's
Mhm.
totally accidental, but it's just more evidence that there are themes like imagery,
Mhm.
situations, constraints that I'm drawn to and kind of can reshake to make new work. But there's no like the characters don't repeat, I guess is maybe the simplest way to put it.
No, it answers the question.
Yeah.
Um, you said that sister story. How long does it take you to complete, like, your average piece of work? I don't wanna say short story because you don't write completely in short stories, but
Yeah, I mean, there's a big range. There are some
Mhm.
stories, and it depends on where you put the starting point. Like that one story I was just mentioning, I wrote it, I would say, pretty quickly, maybe over the course of a month,
Mhm.
from initial gestation on the page to final line and some revisions.
Mhm.
But the concept for that story had been bouncing around in my head for years, and I just had
Those are always
literally,
the best ones, I feel like.
yeah, exactly. I was really excited when it finally, I felt like found the rhythm that was going to make the core idea function.
Mhm.
And so if you put the starting point and at the initial conception of the idea, like, it was probably like 6 or 7 years. But the actual, like when I felt like I could write it,
Mhm.
about a month, I think.
Oh, that's not too bad. Now I'm coming at it from the opposite. Well, I'm coming from a long form perspective, and you've got so much time that goes into things. But I'm also thinking, with a short story, how much third party editing goes on, or how much third party, like, beta reading, etc., goes into that process. I have no idea.
Oh yeah, I mean, I have a group of uh, writer friends and colleagues who I
Mhm.
regularly share work with, and I would
Mhm.
say having that be a part of my life has been one of the most important aspects of my writing process. Just being in regular connection with, not just for them to see my work, but for me to
Right.
see their work, and
Experience theirs and
be in dialogue with other writers about like what's working, what's not working, why
Mhm.
we like this decision, how we might do it differently. Like having just constantly being immersed in those conversations, like I carry with me into those morning writing sessions. And so
Mhm.
even when it's not my work that's getting attention, it's super helpful. And I really have relied on having, I guess, like community like that.
Yeah.
I would say not every story. I don't send every story I write to that group of folks, but there's usually at least one or two other folks who see my work and give me some initial thoughts before I start, submitting it to magazines and journals.
Okay. Um, you've put together 2 books. Do you plan on doing more collections like that?
Yeah, I'm just about done with the newest one. I'm at the point with it that I could probably send it out, but I'm trying to make sure that I really think I should send it out.
Right.
There's a couple stories in it where I'm like, is that the? Do I want to go to bat with that? So a little on the fence, and so I'm trying to make sure that the balance feels right for a full collection. But I think pretty shortly I'll be sending it out to folks, which I'm really excited about. I think it has my best work, but the most recent work, I don't know.
I don't know. That's always subjective. I don't know if you're anything like me, but something I think I'm like, wow, this is really good. And then you put it in the drawer and you go back to it like, I don't know, 6 months later, you're like, oh my God, this is crap. What was I
Oh
thinking?
yeah, constantly. So that's why there's a couple in there that I'm like, I gotta make sure that that's not what's going on. That there was not.
Right.
That's good.
You pumped up your own ego accidentally. Um, what's the process with that? Just off the like you submit stories to magazines, etc. Do you also then include those in the book, or they you just consider those published standalones?
Oh no, those will end up in the book. All the ones that are in the collection at the moment have been published. One of them hasn't come out yet, but it
Okay.
picked up recently. So yeah, actually, I think I would feel weird putting in one that hadn't been vetted.
Vetted by somebody else?
Yeah, like all of these stories have been, somebody who I don't know out in the world was like, I like
Mhm.
this. I want to get behind it. I want to be a part of it coming into the world. And putting a collection of those together feels nice. Like, if I share that with a editor, it comes with the this tacit endorsement of a whole crowd of people. So I
Right.
think that's nice.
And somebody else liked this well enough that
Yeah.
you feel able to put it in a complete body of work. Um, are your books I know a lot of short story authors, they put them in by themes, or is that do your books carry a theme at all, or are you just putting stories together that you like and think go together?
I mean, they are loosely themed. I'm not like it's a
Mhm.
book about X.
Well, yeah,
That's
I'm just getting off of a kick of reading a lot of, Charles DeLint. He
hmm.
does so many short stories, and he just compresses them all into volumes that all have, like, a thematic thing, like so, I don't know, that's, I guess, where the question's coming from.
Yeah, I mean, my first collection, I think, definitely had a theme of like negation and nothingness, like
Mhm,
exploring those two ideas. And then the second one was just sort of like a B sides of the first one, really. Um, is more interested in like trash and um, I don't know, discarded things.
mhm,
A lot of the pieces are like made out of things that someone might discard.
mhm,
Um, and the newest one, a lot of it has to do with maybe two things. One of them is like doubling, like there being pairs of things, and then shame, I think, is one of the
mhm,
main ideas running through a lot of the stories.
okay. Do you have a favorite piece of work that that you've worked on or are working on?
It's a good question.
Like, is one, like, the baby that you like the best?
Yeah, the most recent story that came out is one that felt like really close to my heart. Felt very um, like a representative of what I've been trying to work on.
Mhm. What was
And
that?
it's called. It's a really poor choice in titles too. The life changing magic of tidying up, which
Okay.
in SEO, as I'm always you're not gonna find this short story first. But yeah, that story, felt um, like important to me personally. Like it was pushing my mm, craft along in a way that I just trying some things that I hadn't tried before.
Mhm.
Yeah, so I felt good about that one.
Good. It's always nice when you feel good about your own stuff, aside from the whole ego boosting up of your own work. That's
Yeah.
usually bad. Um, so let's talk about just the building of the story. Just what's the building blocks? Like, what's the process you go through?
Um, I think I often start with just kind of an initial either like starting image or
Mhm.
a place I'm hoping to arrive at, and that I feel like
Okay.
I need to set the groundwork for that situation or image to occur.
Mhm.
And I think the other component is that I have to feel that the premise or the constraints of the writing afford me an opportunity to engage with something more emotional, something
Mhm.
um, that I'm grappling with about what it means to be alive or to get along with other people. That
Mhm.
the the premise, the conflict, the gimmick of the story is going to afford some space that allows the language to play with that,
Right.
so that I feel like I'm not just, I don't know, writing something goofy, but that I'm
Mhm.
um, giving myself an inroad to process how I feel about something.
Okay.
And then mechanically, I think it happens paragraph by paragraph, essentially. Like
Right.
I try to write one paragraph and then
Right.
look at it and go, do I like this? Does this paragraph work? And really, my next step is like, okay, I'm gonna try to write the next one. I know some folks do it sentence by sentence. I'm much more
Uh-huh.
at the like paragraph chunk level than at the sentence level. I can get too.
Mhm.
I know some people it really works to do it at the sentence level. For me, I know work that I try to do that way where I'm like really combing it sentence by sentence as I go. I end up with my language becomes too ornate or like too wrapped into
Mhm.
itself. When I
Right.
function at the paragraph level, I find a healthier balance of some of
Mhm.
the language work and the like. I don't actually moving the plot along work.
Right. Speaking of plot, how much plotting are you doing in these? Or how much of a plotter, I guess, are you? Like, how much do you lay out before you actually start writing?
Very little. It's usually at the most like that kind of image I'm shooting for. I want to
Mhm.
get to
Right.
this situation. So
You wanna end on this point so you know how to get to it.
yeah, so and then I might be like, okay, I think XYZ needs to occur in order for that to
Mhm.
feel justified, for that to feel
Right.
rewarding. And I'll set out with some of those beats in mind, but they usually end up going by the wayside. Um,
Yes,
and I
they
think
usually do.
the real approach I take is maybe like trying to think of things that surprise me. So I like not
Mhm.
knowing exactly where it's headed because then it feels as surprising to me while I'm writing it as I hope that it might feel to
Mhm.
someone reading it. And I try to follow that sense of excitement when I go, like, oh, it'd be crazy if this happened next. Okay, let me try that.
Right. Um, so you're so I'm kind of imagining you, like, just writing the story as it unfolds. Do you ever then go back and weave through, like, different narratives into it to make it all, like, tie together and make sure the punch at the end is, I don't know, relevant?
Yeah, definitely. Like I might, as I'm getting to the last third of a story, which
Mhm.
I find the first third and the last third the easiest to write in a story. The
The
middle
middle, I
part
don't
is
I'm
stuff.
I'm the same way, the middles kinda suck for me.
And once I start to see things like popping in that last third, just like you described, I'll be like, oh, this makes so much sense to me as an ending. But in order for it to work, I need the person to have been a little worried about this, or like I needed
Mhm.
the environment to be like seeding the possibility here. And so I'll go back and work those into the paragraphs. I try to be very, I don't know, like trimming the bonsai tree about it. Like if I'm have
Mhm.
to do like really elaborate things, then I'm going to question that decision. But
Right.
um, yeah, slipping in um, a couple things along the way in order to make the ending work or some portion of the last third work. Pretty
Mhm.
common revision process for me.
Yeah, I noticed also in a lot of in a lot of the short stories that I have read, because clearly I haven't read the entire body of your work, um, you like the veiled ending, like the open ending a little bit, and I think that's really powerful. But then I did notice, like, I don't know, I never expected that to coming the way it did. Like I always expect, I don't know if it's just me, but I always expect a concrete end. Kind of maybe it's coming from like the novelist part of me, but and then not having that, which just makes it go like, whoa. And now I feel like I need to pick your brain about something. Like, how did you expect that to end?
Welcome questions about that, any one of them. Um, but yeah, there's two things that I enjoy as a reader. One is a sense of like, wait, which one was it? When I finished
Mhm.
the story and like being able to debate with my friends, like, no, it was definitely that. And they're like, no, it was definitely that.
Right.
I love that feeling of duality, not just for the conversation, but that's often how I experience the world, just not knowing
Mhm.
which thing is right. So,
Right.
that feels true to me. And then the other thing I'm always trying to shoot for, and this I'm really hit or miss on. Like it's easy to leave things open ended, but
Mhm.
the sense of like surprising inevitability, like you
Mhm.
didn't see the ending coming, but then when you get to it, you're like, well, now that I think about it, it makes a lot of sense that that's where it
Mhm.
ends up. But you,
Right.
so that's something I'm like, I don't know. That's the dream. Sometimes I get it. Other times it ends up being like you really took me out on left field here, and I don't
Mhm.
really know why.
No, I enjoyed all of what I read of yours. I didn't feel like I was left out in left field for any of them, but some of them was like I'm thinking of example, the one about the cancer, the new, new middle class. I did not expect it to end the way it ended. It almost twisted back on itself and made me think that she missed Michael so much that she wasn't going to kill him. She just needed to imagine him under the, I don't know, pile of blankets slash bags.
Yeah, I mean, I really wanted to capture that. I guess like space between wanting something and not wanting something,
Mhm.
and there's like some stuff about life and death intermingling in that
Mhm.
story. And so I really wanted to work with things that feel like they're the opposite,
Mhm.
kind of becoming the same, and leaving the reader with a feeling of like, wait, I don't know. I could read this literally like totally polar ways. Uh,
Mhm.
because a lot of people are like, she definitely killed him, or a lot of people are like, she definitely didn't. Um, and I don't have an answer to that question.
Um, or like the cruise one that, you put up recently, like, he was questioning which brother he was himself at the end, and I liked that. I was curious, was that a later addition? Like, is that a storyline that you threaded through, or was that one of the original ones that you started with?
Oh yeah, I would say the connection to the Edgar Allan Poe story about a
Mhm,
maelstrom definitely came late in the game, and was one of the things that like made it possible for me to conceive of how to write that story. That's an example of a
mhm,
story that it's been banging around in my head for a long time. A ship
mhm.
that thinks on on purpose, like for vacation. And I was like, but what is the point of that story? Like, why? It's a fun premise, but what is a character going through that is going to matter?
Uh-huh.
Um, I forget what book I was reading where it came up, but they summarized that Edgar Allan Poe story. I was like, oh yeah, that story, and highlighted the thing about the two brothers, one of them hanging
Mhm.
on, one of them, and I was like, okay, I think there's something personal enough in there that's mineable to like serve as a through line throughout the story.
Right.
And so then I just kind of went at it, going like, I think something's going to come out of it, and I didn't really have a too clear of a plan of how I thought they
Mhm.
would work, but um, that was the piece that allowed me to actually sit down and write the story.
Oh, that's awesome. Because it definitely, from the reader's standpoint, that it definitely did, like, it wove in and out in a really good way. That and the tooth I really wish you brought up more toothbrush towards the end, like, he found the toothbrush he was looking for in the gift shop or something, like, I was waiting for that, and then it didn't happen. I was like, "Oh, man. I want him to find a toothbrush."
Yeah, that's good. Would have been nice for him to get his teeth cleaned by the end.
Or at least, like, I don't know, laying on the floor, "Oh, there's the toothbrush he was going to buy right there."
That's nice. That's nice.
No, that's just me, like, I latched onto that. I thought that was I don't know. I was trying to come up with ideas of what we were gonna talk about today, and I read that piece about the toothbrush, and for some reason, it just hit me. Like, that's really good. You're taking this element of the boat that sinks on purpose, and then you're just like, the guy needs a damn toothbrush. That's all he wants.
And the toothbrush thing is an example of something that I do often in my work, which is like,
Mhm.
I don't know. I don't really want to write about a conflict, that animates the story,
Right.
but you like kind of have to have them. So I don't have to, but it can make some of the writing easier. So I often try to just come up with like fake ones, guy
Right.
with his toothbrush, like that's going to animate some action. The story is totally about other things. I think other problems that he's going through are more important.
Mhm. But
But
he's focusing on the toothbrush like a normal person would.
Yeah, and so it like gets him from one room to the next, essentially. So
Mhm.
I'm always looking for things like that in the story, like they're kind of arbitrary problems that a person might face, and it gets them from one room to the next.
Mhm. I was thinking, it kind of I can kind of see that the thread that goes with that, and also the one, the slow 911, 911 one. Um, like there's different threads, like that game that they start with in the beginning of that short story, and then the questions in that keep popping back up as he's thinking things in his mind afterwards. Um, but then it kind of spins on its head with that device at the end. Um, I was curious, was that device something that you came up with in the beginning, or is that something that you threaded through later? Like, how did that story come about?
It's a good question. I mean, that story was produced within the first 6 weeks of like the lockdown of the pandemic, so it's
Okay.
very it's very informed by that.
Okay,
Uh,
so there's a little bit of crazy in it.
yeah, trying to process what was going on,
Right.
and but then again trying to ground it in like what about my own reaction to the world around me is like surfacing things that I have to process as a person.
Mhm.
And so this idea of like time passing
Mhm.
and the world changing dramatically um, pushed me to thinking about like, like different phases of my own life, the different phases that a character can be remembering. And so this idea of like trying to think back on childhood friends that they hadn't seen in a
Right.
while, how their lives have changed since then, um, became, I guess, the backdrop that I wanted to throw underneath dealing with a big emergency.
Mhm.
And so that's how it ended up that the culmination would be about a device that he brought over with one of those friends that he hadn't seen in a
Mhm.
while. Because it served as like an object that I think could hold some of the gravity of those two people's relationship. Incidentally, that part of it is a real story. I really did steal that object from
Oh,
Yale University,
really?
fight over it in the car with my friend. Yeah,
What does it measure? Or
I
did
have,
you never figured that out?
I have no idea. I have no idea.
That's hilarious. Um, did you feel like you got a lot done during the pandemic? I feel like a lot of people who aren't in the profession of doing, like, that intellectual solo work felt like they got nothing done, and sometimes I feel like it's the opposite with the other group.
There was a risk it could have gone either way. I mean,
Mhm.
um, it was hard. It was hard for everybody. It was hard for me.
Mhm.
And I ended up really committing to like some self care stuff during it, and
Mhm.
like attended to things that I probably should have attended to earlier in my life, um,
Mhm.
and established some routines that were healthy. In part because right at the beginning of it, I literally had very little to do. Like it's so
Mhm.
creating structure for my life. I was trapped
Right.
in my apartment. Apartment's not too big, so creating some routines that establish some variety. That kind of spilled over into even when I could start venturing outside. That those routines still felt really good to me,
Mhm.
and out of those routines and healthier habits, I think there was an increase in productivity for me.
Mhm.
Trying to keep that going.
Good. Um, because I've been talking to a few people about their writing, and especially about their writing in the pandemic, and it seems like a lot of people are like either they didn't like being alone with their own mind, or they were like, "Yes, I finally have time to finish the projects I've been trying to finish."
Oh yeah, I mean, I probably enjoy being alone with my own mind more than I should. Well, it's something for a long time, it was like, wow, I'm really proud of myself for how good I am at being alone. But as I've
Mhm.
gotten older, I've been like, there's some flaws to this coping mechanism um, that I've been trying to balance the scales on. But yeah, I mean, I enjoyed the opportunity to think more deeply about how I engage with the world by through extreme circumstance. And I really wish that it didn't take extreme circumstance for me to have done some of that personal processing that had nothing to do with the larger world.
Hmm.
It was just something I could have done at any point in my life. But I'm glad I did.
Good. So what's coming up next for you on the horizon, other than publishing the third book?
Yeah, well, so that's going to be a big piece of my, I don't know, routine coming up. I'm going to be
Hmm.
sending stuff out to folks, crossing my fingers, etc. And then still making new short stories.
Hmm.
And the other kind of like long-term project I've been plugging away at for a while now, but I'm very excited about is like a musical piece that I've been working with a composer on.
Oh,
I've been doing the lyrics, the libretto for it. We don't really know what it's called.
that's really awesome.
It's been really exciting, especially because it's a different mode of writing for me. I have to be much more
Right.
spare, like all of the
Hmm.
color and I don't know, gesturing that you would do in a piece of prose to kind of
Hmm.
establish the mood, the vibe. I don't have to do any of that. I have to. The task is to be like very efficient and spare and clear about the I don't know, the problems, the themes, the uh, evolution of the plot,
Hmm.
using as little language as possible, which is great. Like I really enjoy that challenge. And then the
Right.
composer, he comes in and he just does pure magic. Like it's such a rewarding process for me to like
Hmm.
hand this thing over, have somebody else understand it, and then do something that seems much more difficult to me, which is like,
Right.
put all this orchestrated music of many instruments, singers, and stuff to
My
bring
brain does
to
not work that way. I do not understand how these amazing musicians make music. Like,
life. Me
it's
neither.
just I'm not wired like that. I have no idea. It feels like magic every time.
Yeah, I went and visited some of their rehearsals. See the string quartet, kind of
Hmm.
like working through the music, and just hearing them talk was like visiting another planet to me because they speak with such confidence and familiarity with things that literally
Hmm.
just sounds totally alien to me. And I'm like, this is great. Immerse me in this.
How'd you get started in this project?
Will, the composer, his name's Will Aronson. He's a great guy. He had done um, the music for the book trailer for my first book, which we used to do
Okay.
book trailers. Do people still do book trailers? So I had a book trailer for my first collection.
Uh-huh.
Made this great song for it, and then we kept saying, we want to do something together. He was often a first reader of a lot of my work.
Mhm.
Um, and we thought there was something there, but it took probably a decade for us to arrive at like, that's the thing we want to work on.
Okay. Now, when you say it's musical, are we talking like you're writing songs for an album or are you writing like songs for an acted drama? What level of musical are we talking about?
Yeah. I think we both envision it as something that would be performed on a stage,
Okay.
and people would, sing at a captive audience.
Okay.
um, Not an album. But the pieces are long, and so we're kind of uncertain when or where this
Mhm.
might actually come to life. So in the end, who knows? We might end up making it not a stage thing, just because it actually does seem pretty difficult to put on.
Okay. That sounds really awesome and I wish you well in that cuz
Oh, thank
even
you.
even that seems like totally out of my wheelhouse. I'm just like I have no idea how you're going to do that.
Well, me too. So
And before we head off today, can you tell the listeners where they can connect with you online, get your books, find you, etc.?
yeah, I've got a website that links out to a lot of goodies.
Hmm.
My
I have
name,
been browsing it all morning.
DolanMorgan.com.
Hmm.
And then, I'm on Twitter at Dolan Morgan. Luckily, I have a relatively uncommon name. So if you look up
That is
Dolan
always
Morgan,
helpful when you're doing like Twitter or Instagram handles.
yeah, so that's nice. You should be able to find me with that. And then, the usual haunts for the books. You can go to
Hmm.
whatever your online supplier might be. Should be able to get both my books through them. And Otherwise, to connect with me, the streets of Greenpoint, Brooklyn. Walking around Upland.
Well, thank you so much. It was lots of fun talking to you today.
Likewise, Deb. Thank you so much for having me.
Read and Write Podcast is edited and produced by Deborah Z. Barth. Music was provided by Lofi Girl and can be found at lofigirl.com or on their YouTube channel. Audio effects were created by Red Octopus and Black River Phonogram. Show notes and previous episodes can be found at readandwritepodcast.com.